I am N.K. Tukral from Edupedia World. Students, in the previous session, I had discussed the 14 principles of management of Fayol. Fayol has introduced 14 principles of management, and all the principles one by one we had discussed along with the advantages or positive effects of each principle as well as consequences of violation. So today I am going to take up the Taylor's principles of management. Before going ahead, I will talk on traditional and modern implications of Fayol's principles. So let us discuss what are the implications coming out of Fayol's principle and versus traditional implications of the principles. Before I move on one by one, let me tell you that with the change of environment in which business is done, the interpretation of these principles has changed a lot. So now let us compare implications one by one. Number one, as you can see in the slide, division of work. In the traditional implication of division of work is specialization in workers' job design, whereas in modern times the implication is generalization in workers' job design. Second principle is authority and responsibility. The traditional implication is managers are empowered here, and whereas modern implication is that employees are empowered. So you can see traditional implication, managers were given power and they were total given the powers and they are empowered, whereas in modern times the employees are empowered. Third principle is discipline. In case of discipline, the traditional implication is formal controls, means the employees have formal controls, and whereas in case of modern employees they have the informal controls. Fourth principle of management is unity of command. In case of that principle, subordinates report to only one boss in case of traditional implication, whereas modern implication coming out of that, in that case subordinates report to multiple bosses. Fifth principle is unity of direction. Traditional implication of this principle is that functions have only one plan and one boss. And in case of modern implication, functions have multiple plans and multiple bosses. So you can see how the things have changed, how the implication has come out of that. The sixth principle is subordinates of individual interest to general interest. In case of this principle, the traditional implication is employees are committed to the organization, whereas modern implication is organization is committed to employees as well as vice versa. Okay. Now the seventh principle is remuneration of employees. In this principle, reasonable pay reward system is there. The implication is there for the traditionally, and whereas performance based reward system is the modern implication. Eighth principle is centralization and decentralization. The traditional implication is top level retains the power, whereas modern implication that dispersal of authority of all levels. Next principle is Scalar Chain. In this principle, formal communication channel is there, whereas modern implication less formal in communication channel. Next principle of management is order, as above Fayol. So what is that? In material and social order for control is there in traditionally, whereas material and social order for coordination in case of modern implication. Next principle is equity. Commitment obtained through kindness in case traditional implication, whereas modern implication is commitment obtained through a sense of ownership. Next principle is stability of personnel. Here the train employees and encourage them to remain in organization, the traditional implication, whereas in modern implication is continuous employee training and development. Next principle is initiative. Traditionally, managers conceive and implement new ideas, whereas in modern times, workers conceive and implement new ideas. The last principle, 14th, is Espirit De Corps. That principle, the traditional implication is maintaining high morale among employees is essential, whereas modern implication is maintaining high morale among employees is not necessary. As already explained under this principle, that is Espirit De Corps, is that according to this principle, Fayol has said that management should take reasonable steps to develop a sense of belongingness and feeling of team spirit among employees. So against this principle, the traditional implication that maintaining high morale among employees is essential, whereas modern implication maintaining high morale among employees is not necessary. So students, these were the points of implications, traditionally and modern implications of Fayol's principle. Now let's go ahead and see what the author F.W. Taylor says. What is his principles? But before coming to the principles as derived out from F.W. Taylor's principles, let us see who is F.W. Taylor. Let me tell you what is the history of that. Who is that person? Frederick Winslow Taylor, that is, he is from March 20, 1856 to March 21, 1915. Was an American mechanical engineer. He started his career as a mechanic and rose to the position of chief engineer in one of the steel companies of USA. During his career of 26 years, he experimented with the ideas and made significant contribution to the management theory. He was one of the intellectual leaders of the efficiency movement and was highly influential in reshaping the factory system of production. Further, I may brief about Taylor that with a background in mechanical engineering, Taylor was very interested in efficiency. While advancing his career at a US steel manufacturer, he designed workplace experiments to determine optimal performance levels. In one, he experimented with shovel design until he had a design that would allow workers to shovel for several hours straight. With bricklayers, he experimented with the various motions required and developed an efficient way to lay bricks. And he applied the scientific method to study the optimal way to do any type of workplace task. As such, he found that by calculating the time needed for the various elements of task, he could develop the best way to complete that task. Now let me tell you about the contributions made by F.W. Taylor. As you can see in the slide, the number one contribution is concrete shape to theory of scientific management. Taylor gave a concrete shape to the theory of scientific management. He was the first one to emphasize the importance of scientific approach managing an enterprise instead of hit and trial method. So scientific approach was framed by in his mind at W. Taylor what he said. Scientifically, he proved the things. So not an just hit and trial methods. And second contribution, publication of two important books on management. Taylor's major contribution was his two important books. Number one, Shop Management, and next, Principles of Scientific Management, which were published in 1903 and 1911 respectively. So for his contribution, he is well known as the father of the scientific management because basically he was concerned scientifically with the things. But students, before going ahead on principles of scientific management that was framed by F.W. Taylor, let me tell you what is the meaning of scientific management. Scientific management refers to use of scientific, systematic, objective and logical principles and techniques to various managerial functions. It stresses that there is always one best way of doing a work. So one of the definitions further I can tell you that scientific management means knowing exactly what you want men to do and seeing that they do it in the best and the cheapest way. So this is the definition of scientific management. Now let's go ahead, students. Let me tell you what are the principles of scientific management as framed by F.W. Taylor. Number one principle is science, not rule of thumb. According to this principle, there should be scientific study and analysis of each element of a job in order to replace the old rule of thumb approach or hit and trial methods. So Taylor believed that there was only one best method to maximize efficiency. This method can be developed through study and analysis. This principle says that we should not get stuck in a set routine with the old techniques of doing work. Rather, we should be constantly experimenting to develop new techniques which make the work much simpler, easier and quicker. So, Under this principle, the method was so developed that should substitute rule of thumb throughout the organization. Let's take an example. Standard time or standard method for doing a task must be scientifically analyzed and should not be based on estimates or past experience or hit and trial methods. So, for instance, use of internet has brought about dramatic improvements in internal efficiency and customer satisfaction. So, this was the one principle he said, science is not a rule of thumb. Another principle, next principle is he said on harmony, not discord. What is this? According to this principle, there should be complete harmony and proper understanding between management and workers, and they should work together for organization goals. As per this principle, such an atmosphere should be created in the organization that labor and management consider each other indispensable, means each is important. Taylor has referred to such a situation as a mental revolution. Taylor firmly believed that the occurrence of a mental revolution would end all conflicts between the two parties and would be beneficial to both of them. To get such harmonious relations, Taylor emphasized on mental revolution, that is, complete change in their mental outlook. It means that management and workers should transform their thinking. Both should give up their attitude of opposition and enmity towards each other and should have a positive feeling for each other. For example, instead of fighting over distribution of profits, management, they must focus attention on increasing it. For this, workers should work hard to raise the profits and management should share the increased profit with workers. So, harmony will be there will be no dispute, not discord. On this principle, I may tell you about the philosophy in the Japanese industries. In Japan, there is complete openness between management and workers. If at all workers go to strike, they wear a black badge but do not stop working. So mind it, what they do, they will not stop working. Rather, they work more than normal working hours to gain the sympathy of the management. So that's why mental revolution is always should be there. Mental revolution involves a change in the attitude of workers and management towards one another from competition to cooperation. So again I am repeating, from competition to cooperation. Both should realize that they require one another and both of them should aim to increase the profits. So this is another principle of scientific management as framed by F.W. Taylor. So next principle is cooperation, not individualism. According to this principle, there should be cooperation between management and workers instead of individualism. As the second principle we had discussed, harmony, not discord, and this cooperation and individual, this principle is an extension to harmony, not discord. According to this principle, all the activities done by different people must be carried on with a spirit of mutual cooperation. Taylor has suggested that the manager and the workers should jointly determine standards. This increases involvement and thus in turn increases responsibility. In this way, we can expect miraculous results. Further, I may tell you, under this principle, competition should be replaced by cooperation. Both management and workers should realize the need and importance of each other. Management should take workers into confidence before making any important decision. At the same time, workers should avoid strikes and unreasonable demands. According to Taylor, there should be an almost equal division of work and responsibility between workers and management. So management must insist on paternalistic style of management, whereby the employer takes care of needs of the employee. That's why it was said paternalistic style of management. Management should take care of each and every employee. An open communication system and goodwill may even avoid the need for a trade union. This was the approach and principle of F.W. Taylor. For example, management can involve workers in determining the work standards. It will increase the involvement of workers and they will perform more efficiently. Next principle is development of workers to their greatest efficiency and prosperity. According to this principle, the efficiency of each and every person should be taken care of right from his selection. A proper arrangement of everybody's training should be made. It should also be taken care that each individual should be allotted work according to his ability and interest. So these two words were very important for him, according to the ability and interest. Such a caring attitude would create a sense of enthusiasm among the employees and a feeling of belongingness too. Further, I may tell you that the concern for efficiency should start from the selection process. Every organization should follow a scientific system of selection. The selected worker should be assigned a job as per their capabilities. For example, nowadays, companies send their employees to attend seminars of eminent management experts for mental growth of the employees. So this is what is required under this principle, the development of workers. So these four principles of scientific management was framed by F.W. Taylor. That is, science, not a rule of thumb; harmony, not discord; cooperation, not individualism; and development of workers to their greatest efficiency and prosperity. So students, now we have discussed the principles of management, of Fayol's principle of management, 14 principles, and as well as 4 principles as framed by F.W. Taylor in line with the scientific management. That's why I said F.W. Taylor and scientific management. Now let's go ahead, students. Let's see how we can compare this Fayol versus Taylor theory. Let's compare it with the basis. Before comparing, I may tell you that both Fayol and Taylor have contributed immensely to the knowledge of management, which has formed a basis for further practice by managers. So now let's compare it. Number one, this is perspective. Under this perspective, the Henry Fayol principle says that principles were developed from the perspective of top level. So top level he has considered. Whereas in case of F.W. Taylor, Taylor gave the principles and techniques keeping in mind lower level. As you can see in the slide, the second principle, unity of command. Under this principle, the principle is strictly followed under Henry Fayol. Whereas what Taylor said, Taylor did not follow this principle and insisted on functional foremanship. Third is applicability. In case of Fayol, principles are universally applicable, whereas Taylor's principles are less flexible. Taylor techniques are less flexible and can be applied in specialized situations. Next is basis of formation. Under basis of formation, Fayol's principles are based on personal experiences, whereas Taylor work is based on observation and experiments. Next is focus. Fayol focused on improving overall administration of the organization, whereas Taylor focused on increasing productivity of workers. Next is personality. Fayol was a practitioner and is known as the father of general management, whereas Taylor was a scientist and is well known as the father of the scientific management. Next basis is comparison of basis is human element. What is this? Fayol gave importance to human element in principles like equity, initiative and stability of tenure, whereas Taylor gave more importance to increase in production as compared to human element. Next is emphasis. Fayol emphasized on principles and theory of general administration and also the functions of manager, whereas Taylor laid greater emphasis on standardization of work and tools. So students, today we have discussed the Taylor's theory of scientific management, have discussed also comparison of Fayol's principle of management versus Taylor theory of management. So let's wind up today for this session. Thank you. Bye bye.